Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Disability Inclusion Week webinar, Neurodivergence, How You Can Be an Ally in the Workplace, being presented today by Lauren Mills from Academic Services. My name is Curtis Flood. I am from the Workforce and Engagement team in Central Services, and I'll be overseeing today's webinar. I'm being supported today by Will Pigeon from the project team, also in Central Services, and also a shout out to Amy and Brett, who are currently sitting in the boardroom. Thank you everyone for joining us today and for taking time out of your busy schedule to mark Disability Inclusion Week. Before we get started, I just wanted to run over a few housekeeping things. Firstly, yes, this session is being recorded and it will be made available at a later date. Secondly, the closed captions function has been enabled. So if you require closed captions, just click on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. Thirdly, Lauren will actually be utilizing Padlet during her presentation. So you'll find the Padlet link in the chat section. And at the very end of the presentation, there will be some time for questions and answers. So if you have a question for Lauren, please use the Q&A function. So just quickly, one more time. Yes, this session is being recorded. 2, closed captions have been enabled. 3, the Padlet link is in the chat function. And 4th, if you want to submit a question, please use the Q&A function. Okay, so our numbers are looking pretty good. So to get things underway officially, I'm now going to hand over to our Manager of Quality and Compliance, Mr. Brett Stanford. So it's over to you, Brett.
Thank you, Curtis. And thanks everybody for joining us today for Lauren's presentation on neurodivergence, how you can be an ally in the workplace. This is as part of the library's contribution for Disability Inclusion Week. The university is celebrating Disability Inclusion Week this week up until Friday. So after this talk, why don't you head over to the staff intranet, the university staff intranet, and check out all of the different things that you can do for Disability Inclusion Week. I'd like to, at this stage, just take a moment to acknowledge the tradition of custodianship and law of the country on which the Fisher Library stands, where we are all presenting from today, the unceded lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to those who have cared and continue to care for us. And I'd like to just quickly, for those of you who haven't met Lauren works in academic services in the research analytics team with Philippa, and they've been with us for just about a year and a bit. So Lauren's still quite new, certainly to the likes of me, who seem to have been here for going on a decade. And I think it was really great going down and asking the team, tell me about Lauren and what they do here. And one of the things that Lauren's started to develop a name for is that they've developed training for the research metrics services, so helping academic services understand research impact. So really privileged to have Lauren give this talk today, and so I thank you all for being here. So without further ado, over to you, Lauren.
Hi everyone. So my name is Lauren Mills, and today I'm going to be talking about neurodiversity and neurodivergence in the workplace, or how you can be an ally. The first thing I want to do is just start off with an activity. Now, please don't feel pressured to join in with this activity. It is quite personal, but if you do, please note that you're in a safe place. A Padlet is going to join the chat, and anonymously, I want you to write a time of when you feel you've needed help from someone due to illness, event, etc. How did it make you feel to have recognition and understanding from the individual or the company? Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so what I'm going to start off with is, so what is neurodiversity? Well, simply put, neurodiversity is the concept that everyone has a different way of thinking and learning. It was coined in the 1990s by sociologist and autistic Judy Singer as a way of integrating autism into mainstream society. Since then, it has become a call to action for people with different neurological makeups to be recognized as a social category, the same as differences in gender, sexuality, ethnicity, disability, or socioeconomic class. Next slide, please. Neurodivergence is a term that recognizes that certain people are different from the mainstream and include things such as ADHD, bipolar, dyscalculia, Down syndrome, and many other neurological differences. I put up a few here, but there's many more. Neurodivergence and neurodiversity aren't medical terms, but rather terms that seek to offer a movement that wishes to integrate those with neurological differences into mainstream society. Next slide, please. So it's not an illness. This movement seeks to shift, not just socially, but within the medical community, the concept that those who are neurodivergent have inherently an illness, but rather viewing them as different methods of learning and processing information, some of which become disabilities in an inaccessible and ableist society. Okay, next slide, please. So this is just a really great quote from activist Audre Lorde. It is not our differences that divide us, it is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. And I thought that was just a really great quote. She was an activist from the 1930s through to the 1990s and was an activist for things such as gender equality, racial equality, and also gay rights. Next slide, please. So why am I talking to you about neurodiversity? I'm not a mental health expert, nor am I training to be. But what I do have is a myriad of lived experiences. I have ADHD and bipolar type 2, and being diagnosed and finding the neurodiversity movement has really changed the perception of who I am. Prior to being diagnosed and finding the movement, I had a lot of labels for myself, and so did other people. Lazy, daydreamer. I even had someone compare me to a failed MasterChef contestant, or as they said, they really want to, but they just don't have what it takes. And I internalized a lot of this. I internalized it as me being stupid. I internalized it as me not being enough, and as me being not able to try hard enough, as me just being lazy and dumb. It wasn't until my younger sister was being diagnosed with ADHD that something clicked for me. A lot of the symptoms that she was describing, being unable to focus, being paralyzed when trying to do a task, drifting off, daydreaming, sounded a lot like me. So when I went to the doctor and asked for an assessment, I was diagnosed, and then I went to a psychiatrist and I was diagnosed as having ADHD, and a lot of things clicked for me. It was important for me to be diagnosed because now I understood why school and university was so difficult for me. I wasn't lazy or bad. I had an issue with attention regulation. But this was only the first half. The second came as a rude shock. Ever since my teenage years, I had been dealing with what I thought was just severe depression. I would have these spikes here and there of very high moods and feeling great, but eventually I would crash into these severe depressive moods that would cause me to not get out of bed, not shower. I would barely eat, and I'd cry a lot. This would cause me to have major issues with my jobs. It caused me to almost get fired at one point. It wasn't until last year when my hypomanic episode became more severe that anyone caught on to what was happening to me. I couldn't sleep, became obsessed with baking for some reason, and I felt like I had a motor constantly running inside of me. I was also very argument with friends. I delved into some pretty risky behaviors, and I recklessly spent a large portion of my savings. And my crash was just as severe. I could barely go into work. I started having delusions that I was dead, and it was just a truly terrifying time. As I explained this to a psychiatrist, she looked at my medical history, which at this point could fill a bookshelf at a public library, and said, "I think you have bipolar disorder." At this time, it didn't really hit me because I was so tired from the depression that I could barely even fathom what she was saying. And it wasn't until I was on the correct medication that my life shifted. At first, I wasn't really accepting my diagnosis, at least of the bipolar. I thought it meant that I was crazy or broken. It wasn't until I found the neurodiverse movement that my perception shifted. It wasn't until I understood that everyone's brain works a little differently, and that my experiences were not just weaknesses, but strengths as well. Now, next slide, please. Okay, so now this is just how neurodivergence has affected me, but it affects people who identify it in different ways. Even those with the same diagnosis may not need the same treatment. For example, even though I have ADHD, I have inattentive type ADHD, so I don't really fiddle or fidget a lot. I more daydream and space out a bit. But my sister needs constant stimulation to keep on track, including fidget spinners. Everyone is different, but the differences in their diagnosis doesn't mean one person has more ADHD or more autism than another person. But it's just that their symptoms and how they show are different. Next slide, please. So, how can you be an understanding of neurodivergent people in the workplace? Well, here are 6 tips that can help you be an ally to neurodivergent people. First one is listen. So this is a simple overlooked step. There are plenty of people that are now sharing their experiences on the internet, but also listen to your colleagues about their needs. Second one is don't assume. So don't assume stereotypes about those who are neurodivergent. There are some autistic people who love to chat, some people with ADHD who don't talk, some people with bipolar do work. These stereotypes are harmful to those who identify as neurodivergent, and can create miscommunications. Thirdly, do not sympathize, empathize. Remember this, you don't have to feel sorry for someone to feel for them. Don't assume that because someone is different to you, that their life is less fulfilling or inferior to you. If you pity someone, it assumes inferiority, which is insulting and demeaning. We want to be respected, so assume competence and independence. 4, so support organizations run by neurodivergent people. There are a myriad of organizations that you can get behind that support people who are neurodivergent and that are run by neurodivergent people, such as S4ND or Society for Neurodiversity. You can become a member or help promote one of these groups if you like. 5th, use inclusive language. So don't use language such as autistic or bipolar or other words to describe things with negative connotations. Even exclude the word crazy when describing individuals, as this puts the onus and blame on the individual, where having a neurological condition is not anyone's fault. Lastly, if you see something, say something. If you see someone having a bad time or not coping, ask them if they're okay. You don't have to go into any specific details, but just offering help can really make someone stay. Now, I just want to go over to the Padlet just to see all the different answers and just to talk through with some of them a bit. Sorry, just be a second. Okay, cool. So this is a couple of things that I want you to keep in mind. So when you, so some people will feel relieved and supported, relieved and accepted, like the person accepting who I was and that I was allowed to be imperfect, relieved and far less embarrassed. Someone said having someone recognize my needs and making accommodations is incredibly validating. I was diagnosed with AUDHD, so that's autism and ADHD in my mid-30s. So I had been internalizing a lot of my struggles, which makes that validation from others very powerful. So feeling validated and feeling, so I wanted to do this activity just so people can understand that feeling validated and feeling and needing consideration. Sorry. When I did this activity, I wanted you to think about when you needed consideration due to something outside of your control. So you understand how it might feel for someone who is neurodivergent to have their needs met, recognized, and empathized with. I also wanted to do this activity to help understand how hard it might be for those who are neurodivergent to sort of come out and say something. But thank you for everyone who's contributed. So now I'm just going to lead on to questions.
Lauren, it's Amy here sitting over in the boardroom. This has been great. I wanted to ask about how managers might be able to support the conversation going forward now that we've starting to raise this conversation.
I think the most important thing is to actually have a talk about it. So actually talk about it with colleagues, like go, hey, we just had this meeting with someone who is neurodivergent. You know, why don't you check it out? Like just having that open communication amongst your colleagues. Also being very aware that some people might need different considerations. So an example might be someone's medication might cause their mouth to be dry, so they might need to get up for extra breaks for water and things like that. So to take that into consideration. And even in the hiring process, to take into consideration. So for someone who has autism, might not be able to make eye contact or might sort of go off into tangents when talking and things like that. So to take that into consideration as well when in the hiring process, and maybe even you can even also do breaks and things like that, or sort of meet the person of where their needs are, essentially. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks.
Hi, there's a question here called Lauren, from your perspective and based on the premise that we in the university library want everybody to feel welcome and included here, is there anything you would like to see us do better or take action to improve that is more welcoming and inclusive, or what could really help?
I think there's a big thing about, don't just remember this stuff in neurodiversity or inclusion week. Like, remember this stuff, in a couple of months, or in a year or so. Neurodiversity and inclusion, it's a year-round thing, and you should be talking about it. And you should be talking about it sort of constant, like not constantly, but you should be talking about it maybe semi-regularly. Like just talking about people's different needs and different accommodations that they might have, talking about being aware, especially around language. Like language is a big thing. So not using terms like crazy and things like that or bipolar or autistic to sort of describe things. So that's a big issue as well. But yeah, just sort of remembering these tips and remembering these lessons throughout the year, not just in Disability and Inclusion Week. Another question?
Yes. There's a question here. Thank you for those great 6 tips. As a manager, I'm always trying to make sure lead in an inclusive way. So do you have any additional tips for managers working with team members who are neurodivergent?
I would say the biggest tip
Again,
is just
listen
listening
to your team member, what they need and kind of what they kind of want, but also being open, also being open to talk about it. Yeah, because like there's no one way to sort of manage everyone who is neurodivergent. Like people need different things. So one person might need fidget spinners to kind of work effectively. One person might need water at their desk constantly because they might have a dry mouth from their medication. Yeah, so there's all different types of kind of ways you can help promote, but the best thing is to listen and to accommodate where you can.
The next question is there HR support or information about accommodations for neurodivergent staff members?
I'm not sure about that, and that's a really great question.
Lauren, Amy here, I could probably jump in a little bit and help out with that one. I saw that one come through, and thanks for the question. Thanks, Lauren. There isn't at the moment, but working on it. And it's something that I know Maggie, who's our HR representative, is very keen for us to work with this and to make sure that we have that information. And we want to make our workspaces as inclusive as possible across the board. So we definitely wouldn't discourage anyone from having that conversation with their manager or having that conversation with HR. So the more we talk about it, the more we can understand how we can be more inclusive, as we would with any other thing that we bring to work. So yeah, thanks for a great question. And we will follow that one up too with a follow-up email afterwards, because I don't have all the answers, but we will find out.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amy.
Sorry, Will, if I could just add to that as well. And I appreciate it. Thanks, Amy. That's a great response. And thanks, Lauren, for your response to it as well. I just wanted to add that in terms of for staff accommodations for neurodivergent staff or for any staff member with a disability, that the diversity and inclusion team in HR, that they will provide bespoke support services where they can. So firstly, they have to be aware that there is a need, and then they'll start to develop similar to what we would consider, an injury management support plan, for example, or if somebody is accessing the Benestar, the employee assistance program. There are all sorts of, while it might not be cached in just for neurodivergent staff, it's something that is, that's being developed at the moment, but that there are experts that the university has available to ensure that managers and staff work, well, that everybody can, I guess, do their best in the job.
Lauren, this is a question for you. In terms of being supported in the workplace by way of accommodations, what things have you experienced with which help?
I run my life on timers.
I have so I have an Apple Watch, which is like a massive privilege. And I do timed things so I don't sort of go off and daydream. I regularly get up from my desk and kind of move around a bit just so I'm not feeling that restless. Yeah, I've also explained to my manager that I do have bipolar, and she's been very accepting of that. And I've also explained to her that this might mean that I might need like to have time off here and there just in case because of it, or because of psychiatry appointments and things like that. So those are just some of the things that I have in the workplace that kind of accommodates me. Yeah, so but timers is a big thing. Like my watch goes off every 20 minutes just so I don't daydream and completely lose focus on what I'm doing. So yeah.
Okay, this is a question for everybody. Where can I read more about neurodiversity and being a neurodiverse ally?
That's a great question. There are plenty of resources that I have used for this speech, and that if it's okay, I can post those on the website, on the email, that we'll send out. But yeah, there's plenty of great sources on the internet to have a look at. One that I recently had a look at was an article by Self, and one by Forbes as well. But I'll make sure to have those in the email.
There's another question here, which is, there is increasing support for uni students who are neurodivergent, and I feel this is further ahead than staff support. Do you think we need to learn much from looking at what we do for students?
I
Do you think
we need to look at what we are
doing for students and looking at sort of integrating that for staff? I also do think there needs to be a bit of a culture shift, and how we kind of a bit of a culture shift in how we kind of speak about neurodivergency and other disabilities as well. I think it needs to be more open, which is why I have sort of spoken about myself today. Not that I just also love hearing myself talk. But yeah, I definitely do think we need to look at what we're doing for students and try and incorporate that to what we're doing for staff.
Lauren, again, this is a question for you. What are your thoughts on ADHD being included in Disability Awareness Week and being considered a disability?
That's a big question. I do think it needs to be included because it does impact my life, and it has impacted my life a lot. But like personally, I think it is a disability, but I know that is a bit controversial, but it's not saying that there's anything wrong or anything bad or anything with it, like anyone with a disability. And I do think that it does need to be included in Disability Week, so people are have raised awareness of what ADHD is and how they can be supportive in the workplace, because there needs to be conversations on how we can sort of there's a lot of, so if you go online, there's a lot of talk about how people sort of mask or sort of try and hide their disability or their ADHD or whatever you might call it. And this causes major burnout and major stress and major, you know, just like causes people to be very unhappy. So to sort of have it and talk about it and sort of recognize that, yes, this is something that impacts people, and yes, this is something that can severely impact your workplace, your schooling, and things like that. That's why I think it should be included in Disability and Inclusion Week. But some people might not agree with me. But yeah, that would be my answer.
So that brings us to the end of the questions. Are there any other questions you'd like to raise, Amy or Brett, or anything else you'd like to share? Or is there anything else you'd like to share, Lauren?
I think the only thing that I would
like to share is thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to sort of have a talk about to sort of talk about like my experiences and where I'm coming from, and sort of to let you guys know how you can sort of help support people, I guess, like me in the workplace. I feel very privileged to work at Sydney University, and yeah, I feel very privileged to give this talk.
Thank you very much. There's just one comment here from Jane Barton, which is she's agreeing with you. A really tricky question. This was to the question before. While ADHD and autism are a brain difference, the impact on everyday life means understanding and support are needed, especially in the modern world, in the world, complicated world that we live in. So that was a statement. I think there's another question here as well.
I was just going to say, Will, just noting that we're coming to time, we may take that last question and send it out after, send a response out after, just so we have some space to answer it.
Yeah. So do you want me to ask that question, or?
Just archive it and we'll take it offline.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Will.
I'll just wrap up here. Thanks very much, Will, for hosting that Q&A for us, and thanks very much, Lauren, for giving us a very personal and I think important insight into the lived experiences. I've just posted in the chat. The link to the university's Diversity and Inclusion Week webpage that they've got for all of the different activities you can do. And there are also on Workday, you can do some modules. There's a Hidden Disability Sunflower Scheme module that's just gone up for Disability Inclusion Week. Will stay up afterwards. The library is taking part in the Hidden Disability Sunflower Scheme that the university is piloting. And so I think that's great. We have at our core a need and a drive for inclusion. And so I think that this is a really great space for us to support the university and to help change the culture to start leading the change. So if you can get involved or if you can do a little bit more research or do some training, if you like, and maybe next time around, Lauren will have something else to talk about or some more to talk about in that space. Or perhaps somebody else would like to put their hand up as well and do a presentation. It's a very personal but I think powerful message. So thank you very much for sharing. And I know that everybody here feels really grateful for that you chose to do that. So we feel very, very privileged that you put your hand up. Thank you very much. All right, everyone. Well, enjoy the rest of this is being recorded, so we are going to send this out and we'll do the answers as well with the recording. So it won't be anybody's last chance to see this information or to obtain this information. But until then, I just wish you all the best and I'll see you around. Thanks, everybody.